In this video, we will study about the respiratory system. When we talk about respiratory system, people generally think of breathing. Respiration is the sequence of events that results in the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and the body cell. The human lungs are amazing feats of nature. They pump vital oxygen through airways and into the bloodstream every second of every day. Without this ability, humans could not survive on the earth. So first, we're going to talk about anatomy and physiology of human respiratory system. The vocal cords present in the larynx divide the respiratory tract into two, the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract contains structure like nose, nasal cavity, and pharynx. The lower respiratory tract contains of larynx below the vocal folds, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. Next, let's talk about the anatomy of nose and nasal cavity. If you look at this diagram in detail, we can see the nasal cavity is made up of a roof and also consists of a floor. The main job of the nose and nasal cavity is the filtration of air. This we can see by the small hair-like structure present in the nasal cavity called cilia. The filtration of air is also facilitated by the mucus which is secreted by the nasal walls. Oral cavity also serves as secondary opening for the respiratory tract. The difference of this opening is that there is no filtration, no humidification, and no temperature regulation through the oral cavity. However, the oral cavity has a wider opening, so it facilitates greater intake of air during exercise. This traps dust, pollen, and other pollutants present in the atmospheric air. The other job of nasal cavity is warming and humidification of the air. It prevents dryness in the respiratory membranes. The next structure of human respiratory system is pharynx. Pharynx are also known as throat that lies behind the nose, the mouth, and also the larynx. It connects the oral cavity and nasal cavity to the larynx and esophagus. When the air reaches the pharynx, there is two structures where it can go further. The first is the trachea, which lies in the front, and the second is the esophagus, which lies at the back. One important structure to note here is the epiglottis. Epiglottis is flap of cartilage which causes the entry of trachea and prevent entry of food into trachea and lungs. The next structure in respiratory system is the larynx. Larynx, also known as the voice box. The larynx made up of many cartilages and contains the vocal cords. The main function of larynx is that it connects the pharynx to trachea and the production of sound. The next structure is trachea. Trachea basically a tube-like structure, also known as windpipe, that connects larynx to the bronchi and bronchi in turn connect to the lungs. If we look at the structure of trachea, we can see that trachea is made up of 20 C-shaped cartilaginous rings. These cartilages prevent collapse of the trachea because there is the negative pressure in trachea and lungs during inhalation. Trachea then divides into the primary bronchi. The primary bronchi then divides into the secondary bronchioles, and the secondary bronchioles divide into the tertiary bronchioles. Next, the tertiary bronchioles will further divide to form the conducting bronchioles. These conducting bronchioles then form a 4 to 5 division series of respiratory bronchioles. These respiratory bronchioles are in turn connected to the alveoli. Alveoli are sac-like structures in which the actual gas exchange takes place. These structures have very thin walls that made up of a single layer of squamous epithelium. Alveoli also allow for diffusion of gas. Let's look how the actual gas transport happens inside in a single alveoli. The air that we inhale enters the lung and reaches the alveoli. It is very important to create a very less distance between the alveoli and the capillaries. As we can see, the alveoli are surrounded by the capillaries that are only 1 cell thick. In these capillaries, the deoxygenated blood enters from one side. It exchanges the gases with the alveolar air, and the oxygenated blood is released from the other side. The exchange of gases between the alveoli and the blood occurs by simple diffusion. Diffusion requires a concentration gradient, so the concentration of oxygen in the alveoli must be kept at a higher level than in the blood, and the concentration of carbon dioxide in the alveoli must be kept at a lower level than in the blood. Let's study how these gases exchange. When carbon dioxide is in higher concentration in the capillary compared to the alveolus, so it diffuses into the alveolus. The walls of both the capillary and alveolus are very thin, so the gases only have a short distance to diffuse. In the same time, oxygen diffuses from high concentration in the alveolus to low concentration in the capillary. Cells in the alveoli wall secrete a fluid that keeps the wall moist for easy diffusion. During exercise, the gas exchange requirements of the lung increase, with both increased consumption of oxygen and increased production of carbon dioxide. More intense exercise also results in increase of lactic acid production. Upon commencing exercise, there are cardiac changes. Both an increase in the heart rate and stroke volume lead to an increase in cardiac output. This results in an increase in pulmonary circulation. In addition, both the respiratory rate and tidal volume increase during exercise, and hence alveolar ventilation also increases. This increases gas exchange and minute volume. Exercise can be aerobic or anaerobic. The anaerobic threshold is a controversial term used to describe when anaerobic metabolism begins. Anaerobic metabolism increases lactic acid production, and the point at which this occurs will vary with the fitness of the individual. During aerobic respiration, carbon dioxide production, minute volume, and alveolar ventilation increase proportionally, resulting in a constant partial pressure of carbon dioxide. However, after the anaerobic threshold, the minute volume and alveolar ventilation rate increase more than the carbon dioxide production, leading to a low partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Additionally, the buildup of lactic acid results in hyperventilation owing to the lactic acidosis it causes. As work increases, oxygen consumption increases proportionally until it plateaus. This should occur after the anaerobic threshold has been reached. At this point, oxygen consumption is at a maximum, and even though work can increase, oxygen uptake will remain at this maximum point because it is not possible to increase the cardiac output any further. This maximum point is approximately 10 times the resting oxygen consumption. In terms of the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, exercise causes a right shift due to the increase of body temperature, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and hydrogen ion. This increases oxygen availability to the muscles.